Hi, it's Lynn Liaz, and please help support my ministry by visiting my sponsors at getthetea.com. Check out all of Ronnie's health products and order some today. Find the ones that work for you or that might be something that helps a problem you're having, or whether it's for daily maintenance. Check out getthetea.com and make sure that you mention that you heard about Ronnie and getthetea.com from Lynn Liaz. Your support is greatly appreciated. Hi, this is Lynn Liaz, and I have with me today Professor Danny Faulkner from Answers in Genesis, and we are going to talk about something we have not really discussed before. In fact, we've mentioned it, but we haven't really done a recording on it, and that is Planet X, or Niburu. And he's going to share some facts with us about Planet X. So I'm really excited to hear what he has to say. I myself have not really delved into Planet X or Niburu much, to be honest. So I'm really excited to hear his expertise on the matter. So welcome, Danny. Thank you for joining me once again.
I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm happy to have you. And so you have some knowledge about Planet X, and we've been hearing about Planet X and Niburu for, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, is it Niburu or Niburu, whatever, for a long time now. And there are people out there who think that it's going to collide with the Earth or do catastrophic damages to the Earth. So what can you share with my people that are watching about Planet X?
Well, I understand the probably the best pronunciation is Nibiru, but a lot of people say Niburu, whatever. I may go back and forth on pronunciation. And Planet X kind of got involved in that too. I'll give you a brief rundown of the history of this thing. Back 40 years ago, a man named Zechariah Sitchin, he wrote a book called The 12th Planet. He followed it with about 11 more books in a series, and this was published in 1976. And the word Nibiru comes from a Akkadian word. That's from ancient Sumer, one of the earliest civilizations. I think it's probably the immediate post-flood civilization. And it's some of its words float around in other later languages. But the word refers to a crossing. It came to be known to be associated with the equinoxes, particularly the autumnal equinox, which was located in Libra back then. Also, it was came to be associated with certain other bodies, such as I think the planet Jupiter may have been assigned with it because the orbits cross ours at certain points. It's kind of nebulous, the exact origin, some of the meanings of this. Now, what Sitchin was saying was that some of these ancient Babylonian records referred to this rogue object, this rogue planet that he identified with Nibiru, and he suggested it was on a 3,600-year orbit around the sun, a very elliptical orbit, similar to comets, which meant that it spent most of the time far from the sun and far from the Earth. But once each orbit, it would pass briefly through the inner solar system where it could interact with bodies there, including the Earth, either directly with the planet or with satellites or moons orbiting this hypothetical planet. And it led to big catastrophes. I believe he argued that even the Earth was birthed through one of these interactions in the past. And supposedly the Babylonians recorded the last passage of this body, and it had some real catastrophic things that happened as a result of this. Well, people who do study the ancient Near East and the languages there and the tablets and so forth in the Middle East, they dismissed virtually everything that Sitchin had to say about this. They said it's just a complete fabrication on his part. But he had his followers. Now you go forward about 20 years ago, and there was a woman who claimed to receive sort of transmissions from the Zeta Reticuli, and she argued that her name was Nancy Leiter, by the way, a leader. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, but she claimed to have transmissions or communications from these zetas. They were from Zeta Reticuli, or planet orbiting that particular star. And they were telling her that a rogue planet was going to collide with the Earth in 2003 or come very close to the Earth and have civilization-ending consequences as a result. Again, this was to be in 2003. And 20 years ago, she intimated and even kind of confirmed that what she called Planet X was the same as Nibiru. By the way, Sitchin didn't like that, and he argued with her strenuously till his death that that was not the case. but who cares? I mean, this is just sort of became fact in the minds of a lot of people. And her choice of Planet X was a bit unfortunate too, because 100 years ago, the astronomer Percival Lowell became convinced there was another planet beyond the orbit of Neptune, causing slight changes in the orbits of the outer planets, and he then launched a search that lasted for decades. In fact, it went on for 15 years after his death, before they finally discovered Pluto, a little tiny thing, in 1930, and they concluded this must be that looked for planet X. They used X in that sense of being like an unknown variable, as you would have in algebra. So she used this planet X, kind of recycled it from decades before. And since then, there have been a number of announcements of a possible discovery of another planet or something. And when that happens, or another body in the solar system, when that happens, unfortunately, people kind of convolve that with all of this. For instance, I believe it was in the last year, there was a study based upon the orbits of some of the asteroids very far from the sun, orbiting just beyond the orbit of Neptune. And there's kind of a convergence of their orbits all aligned in the same direction. And they suggested, at least in the study, there might be another planetary body, a planetary mass body, much farther out that caused that alignment. And that too was welcomed by some people as being this planet X, or Niburu. I'm going to use the word Niburu to refer to all of this sort of stuff coming together. Well, you'd think with the prediction of 2003 that failed to come to pass that we wouldn't hear any more of Niburu, but it kind of goes away for a while and comes back when it's resurrected for another interaction. The most recent I'm aware of was in 2012. Everybody was concerned about this convergence of things. You had the Mayan calendar supposedly suggesting that the world was going to end in 2012, more specifically on December 21st. There was an alignment there between the winter solstice and the center of our galaxy on that particular date, and so they figured that would be some sort of cosmic forces lining up. And part of this mix was that this planet Niburu was going to come to the Earth and interact with the Earth some way with a near pass, and again have civilization-ending consequences. Well, again, that didn't happen. And back in 2012, 2011, 2010, there were many people who claimed to have seen Niburu. They said that scientists had found it, astronomers had found it, and that it was right here near the sun. It was rounding the sun. It was right here. It's going to hit us pretty soon. Well, if it's following any kind of orbit like we understand any other orbit follows, like the planets and comets and so forth, once it enters the inner solar system, it has a matter of months until it moves back out again. It won't come around again for thousands of years yet. So if it was here around 2010, 2011, it's long gone by now. This is now 2017, so it's not here anymore. But that didn't matter, because now with all the excitement of September 23rd, 2017, many people are arguing that Niburu is once again getting involved. Some people argue that the 3 hours of darkness during the crucifixion was caused by an eclipse of the sun by Niburu. And the claim is it's coming back now, and 2,000 years, nearly 2,000 years later, and going to do the same thing on September 23rd, so that people can really see this miraculous sign in the sky. So Niburu just keeps coming back and keeps coming back. There have been many claimed images taken. I had a fellow here at the Answers in Genesis, our observatory, about a month ago, who asked me about it. He said he had seen it and showed me a picture, pull out a cell phone, and it's got the sun there and some object nearby. And I asked him when this was and how long he saw it. He saw it for a few minutes, took a quick photograph, and then it wasn't there anymore. And I tried to tell him, well, large bodies like that don't move like that. If they're there at one point in the morning, it's going to be there throughout the day. Why was it there and a few minutes later it wasn't there? That's not the way these things work. And many of the photographs I've seen out there appear to be lens flares. Other things are so blurry I can't tell what they are. And either these people are looking at defects in images, or I don't know if they're intentional or not, but I've not been impressed with any of the photographs. And then there's all these conspiracies that people put forth, that astronomers and NASA have actually imaged this thing, and we're trying to cover it up, and we're trying to pretend it's not there. We're lying to the public, and on and on and on. We ought to confirm this for the world, but we're not, because, well, we're just mean people, I guess. and we're all in on the conspiracy, I suppose, to keep this quiet. I didn't get the memo because I've never been instructed about this, nor have I seen this object. Now, there have been several claimed objects out there, and I'd like to take a little time to run through those. One of the most common I've seen out there, at least a few years ago, was images taken with the Hubble Space Telescope of this object. The object is actually V828 Monocerotis. What that means, it's the 828th variable star discovered in the constellation Monoceros. And these images were indeed taken by the Hubble Space Telescope, and the images do look different. And the reason being is that back in 2002, this star went through a particularly powerful eruption, and we're still trying to decipher what this eruption means. It's believed to be a red nova, perhaps, but it's just not behaving the way we've generally seen objects behave. So it's kind of an odd object, and of course, it got the attention of astronomers, and so the Hubble Space Telescope has taken multiple images, and those images are real. I mean, there really are images of this object, but the object is not Niburu. For one thing, it's fixed in one location in the sky. If it's an orbiting object around the sun, it will move through the stars. This thing doesn't. It's fixed. So obviously that's it. That's not an orbiting body. It's a distant star. And then there's another one that's gotten a lot of attention in the last year or so. The people went to Google Sky. I went there and checked it for myself. And there's this object over in a particular position. It's down below the feet, down below the feet of Virgo. So that kind of fits with the whole motif of September 23rd. You got this woman in the sky giving birth to a child, and you've got later on in chapter 12 of Revelation, the red dragons, presumably Satan. They're standing before the woman, waiting to devour her child as soon as the child is born. So right there, you have Virgo in the sky, and then you have this red thing sitting here, red and green. It looks very nefarious, and of course, this must be Niburu. And you look on other sky renderings, other charts, and you see no object there whatsoever. And so it's there on the Google Sky for people to see. But it gets even better. Supposedly, there is a black patch sitting there. You got this wonderful background in the infrared in this Google Sky look, and then there's this black patch, and there's a little bit of stuff peeking out. It's that red and green peeking out from the right side of that patch that is supposed to be this hidden object. And so this black patch proves that NASA and astronomers are trying to have actually imaged this thing, but we're covering it up so people won't know about it. It's a big secret, and that just feeds on the whole conspiratorial ideas that people have. Well, think about it just for a minute. The people at NASA supposedly have found this really wicked-looking object. We know it's this rogue planet Niburu, but we want the general public not to know about it. So what do? We slap a black patch up there, and it doesn't even really cover the object up. It's still peeking out around. Apparently, we're competent enough to understand we need to cover this up, but we're so grossly incompetent, we don't do a very good job of doing that. That doesn't make any sense. Furthermore, even better than putting a black patch there, why don't you just do some real easy computer animation, grab some colors of nearby and kind of smooth it in and cover it up so nobody even knows there ever was an object there in the first place. We're supposed to be really good at using computers to fake out things. When it comes to something like this, we're just complete amateurs. Again, this doesn't make any sense if you start thinking about it at all. Now, I'm thankful to a fellow that went out there and actually tried to debunk this. In fact, did a very good job, and so I'm relying upon his expertise, but he's correct in all his associations there. He makes that point that this is not some bungled attempt to cover something up. You got to look at the history of it. When Google Sky does this all-sky view in infrared, it's using the results from a satellite launched in 1982 or 83 called IRAS. It's an infrared satellite. It was the first infrared map of the entire sky attempted. You have to use a satellite because infrared is almost completely blocked by our atmosphere of our Earth. And you also had to have a special camera and optics and so forth on it. You see, infrared is heat radiation. And so even the camera itself at normal temperature is going to be registering a lot of infrared radiation. So they had to cool this with helium. And it's got a dewar on there. The helium evaporates away, and as it does, it chills this camera and keeps it working just fine. By the way, many of the cameras I've used and other detectors I've used in my research in astronomy, in the visual part of the spectrum, we have to cool them too. Otherwise, the noise shows up as false light, and we want to get rid of that. So we cool. It's a pretty common thing in astronomy to do this, except in infrared, it has to be a lot cooler than normal. So they cooled this, but the coolant only lasted for about 10 months. That was the long as they planned for it, and indeed it gave out after 10 months. So in that 10-month mission in 1983, they mapped most of the sky. If you go to Google Sky, you'll see these long loons on either side. These are patches of the sky that it never got to in those 10 months. Some parts of the sky got double coverage, but other parts didn't get any at all. The way it operated is it scanned through a large band through the sky, narrow band, and it kept scanning and moving slowly across to build up the image. Now, if you go back to 1983 and you check the locations of the planets on that during that time period, you will find that this big patch in the sky and a little stuff bleeding out was the location of Saturn during those 10 months. Now, Saturn was moving, orbital motion carried it forward, but kind of slow. And so what those little, and by the way, it's color coded, red and green. We can't see infrared. So when you get this information, this image built up and a computer stored sort of thing, you have to portray it as something. So they use false colors. They use green for one band pass, red for another, yellow and blue perhaps for the two others. I think there were 4 band passes in that one. Well, here you've got red and green showing up because of 2 band passes that were being recorded. Furthermore, I believe the reason why it's black is because Saturn is extremely bright in the infrared, making it one of the brightest objects in the sky. So consequently, that blackness there is from an overload. The thing I believe it completely blew out the numbers on this detector. And so instead of being an attempt to cover something up, there's just no data there because the data was irretrievable. It just was completely blown out. It'd be like looking at a big white image if you took a very long exposure with a camera, much longer than you should have. I've done that before, by the way, and you see nothing. And that's all that black patch is, and the little red and green you see is from some of the data that actually did get through on the thing. So this whole thing on Google Sky is being supposedly the red dragon prophesied there, or the planet Niburu, take your pick. That's nonsense. It's just people who have gone to this Google Sky map and didn't know what they were doing and didn't understand some of the physics and some of the astronomy going on. And there's one other one that's been out there, and this one had me going for a little while here. They have another map of the whole sky done in infrared, done by a spacecraft called WISE. It was launched in 2009 or 2010, I believe. It was almost 30 years after IRAS, so the technology had improved tremendously. And it was basically doing the same thing that IRAS did. It was trying to image most of the sky. And it got double coverage in some places pretty good. It covered, I think, almost the entire sky during its 10-month mission until its coolant ran out. But it's a much better image. And if you go to the IRAS, the WISE whole sky, as I have done, you'll find that at a particular position in the sky, there's this bright object sitting there. And if you go looking at other parts, other star charts, you'll see nothing there at all. And somebody identified this as the object IC 5385. Now, IC stands for the Index Catalog. It was a supplement or an addition to the New General Catalog, NGC, done over 100 years ago. And a man named Dreyer did that, and he also did the 2 versions of the IC, the Index Catalog. It turns out IC 5385, I think, is the next to the last entry in that catalog. And apparently what somebody did is they found this object on WISE. They looked up the coordinates. Then they started looking for any object there they could find. And they found IC 5385 near those coordinates. And by the way, it's near the vernal equinox, just below the vernal equinox. And so they decided that's what it was. Well, I decided to look up IC 5385. I went to a thing called SIMBAD. This is something that astronomers use all the time. It stands for Set of Identifications, Measurements, and bibliography for astronomical data. Virtually every known astronomical object outside the solar system, at least, has an entry there, and I use it quite frequently. So I went there and looked for 5385, and they said they had no entry for that object. So what's going on? Well, as it turns out, the IC and the NGC has a number of errors in it. Some of them are duplicate objects, some are non-existent objects, misidentifications, and so forth. It even says on the entry, I looked it up on IC 5385 back over 100 years ago, that it was extremely faint and it wasn't confirmed. What that means is that on a photographic plate taken well over a century ago, it was a little fuzzy object, and it was only seen on one plate. No one's been able to confirm anything there. In fact, there is nothing there, no galaxy, no nebula, no star cluster. It was probably a defect on that photographic plate, so the object really doesn't exist. It's positioned as close to this thing that somebody saw on the WISE infrared scan. Well, I having remembered what happened with the other nefarious object that people thought was the red dragon of Revelation 12, I decided to check the positions of the Jovian planets, the four outer planets, in 2010. And for some reason, I decided to start with the planet Uranus. Well, I didn't have to go any farther than that because I looked up the position of the planet Uranus, and it is a dead ringer for that position just below the vernal equinox. All year long it was there. And so this odd object that someone found on the WISE infrared sky was none other than the planet Uranus. Uranus isn't nearly as bright as Saturn is. First of all, it's a smaller planet. It's also twice as far away, so it gets 1/4 of the sun light it gets from the sun. It gets then has to go back the same distance to us, so it's much, much fainter than Saturn is. So it didn't blow out the detector, at least, but it is one of the brightest looking objects in the sky there. So this is not planet Niburu. Again, it's an example of people not knowing what they're doing, trying to do something here. Now, I know that many people hearing me are going to get very angry. They're going to get very upset. That's fine. The problem is, how do you know this person that tells you it is Niburu is telling you the truth? Well, you don't. You want to believe what he says, and it's because someone says something on YouTube doesn't make it true. Just because I'm saying it, it doesn't make it true either. I'm just offering the facts here. I'm offering the evidence, and people can accept it or reject it as they will. But they need to do it on a rational basis. They need to do it in an intelligent basis, and you don't need to do it in a knee-jerk reaction, either accepting or rejecting one or the other. You shouldn't get emotionally involved because it somehow attacks your worldview. You need to critically evaluate the information given to you and decide which one you think makes more sense. And that's basically the problem here. So Niburu, I don't think exists. I've not seen any compelling evidence that it exists. I don't think there's a rogue planet out there. The things they're asking it or expecting or telling us it's doing or has done can't be done physically. And until we actually see something that it does, I'm not gonna accept it.
Wow, Danny, you're just a real party pooper. Your assessment is no fun at all.
Yeah, I get accused of that sometimes.
Well, so I'm glad that you cleared up that people were actually seeing Uranus and not Niburu, because I've heard of that before. And what really amazes me is that people are basing all of these beliefs and events that are supposedly going to happen. They're basing it on things from the Mayan calendar, astrology, Babylonian astrology, which, by the way, I was reading earlier on the internet about some things about Niburu and about how it's known as Marduk's star, and Marduk was a Babylonian god. And
Yep.
so are us Christians, and I'm just saying this rhetorically, I'm not really asking you, I'm saying this for the people, are us Christians supposed to base Bible prophecy and biblical events on things that come from false gods, astrology, Mayan calendars, Babylonian astronomy, and so forth? I don't think so. And I think that us Christians need to be better about really looking at things, because we know that Satan is a copycat, and he is a liar and the father of lies. And when Satan presents to us something that is a deception, it will look like the real deal in every way. But then we have to take a closer look and examine things better. And if there's any holes in it or anything that doesn't line up with God's word, that's how we can know that it is not a sign from God. And being that in the end times, and a lot of you out there listening, you love prophecy and you like to see what's going on, we have to examine everything. As I said in a previous video with Danny, we have to be like the Bereans, because there is going to be a lot of deception, and we just can't latch on to every little thing that comes out. We have to really take a look at it. And so, Danny, my question for you is, what have you heard in relation to why people really believe that this exists? And what information is out there that is making this Niburu or Planet X so factual to them? Because I have some close Christian friends that are right on target with God's word, and they're very stern and firm in their beliefs, but they actually believe that Planet X is something you can't argue and something that is a fact.
Well, I don't get the appeal. I don't understand the appeal. And I do recognize the fact that many people are attracted to fantastic sorts of tales today. I think the internet has certainly done a lot to promote all this stuff. I mean, there are plenty of things. We've talked about September 23rd, but we could also talk about flat Earth. We could talk about moon landings. They were somehow faked. People then have to believe that the NASA is just this nefarious, if satanic organization, and that they've lied to us about everything. So the government is lying to us about everything. And I'm not naive, and I don't think that everybody tells you the truth, but I also don't believe that everybody's telling you a bunch of lies 100% of the time. I just don't think that's the way the world works. If all of the stuff they're claiming is true, of all these great conspiracies and so forth, then I must be part of it too. Very few people want to actually make that accusation directly. I haven't yet anybody make it to my face. I don't imagine they would. But the thing is, folks, no, I've never been a part of a conspiracy. I have no interest in being a part of a conspiracy. I guess conspiracies are a lot more fun. People think fantastic things are going on and want there to be more than what appears going on. And I guess the Matrix movies help keep that going. I don't know. I'm really baffled by it. And many times people have preconceived notions about eschatology, about end times, and so forth. And so when somebody comes along peddling an idea that fits and conforms so well to our expectations, then you're going to tend to let down your guard and uncritically accept everything that person has to say, and not apply a baloney detector to see if it makes any sense. Again, my appeal a few minutes ago was to people who were trying to claim that NASA was putting this black patch up in the sky. That's a perfect example of it. Really think that through. Does it make any sense that they would do such a poor job of doing that? And of course, it doesn't make any sense. But people, for some reason, just let their guard down, and they won't think those things through.
Well, I believe that our government does keep things from us and lie to us. But like you said, I don't believe everything that is being put out is a lie. It's just mixed, and it's so hard for some people to tell. And that is why, once again, it's very important that we look into everything deeply, research everything, ask a lot of questions. There's nothing wrong with asking questions, and find out the truth for ourselves and compare it against God's word. Otherwise, we're all going to be so confused that it's not even funny. And I think a lot of people are very confused right now with so many things on so many levels. For instance, people are putting out videos saying this may be my last video, or this is going to be my last video, because they think tomorrow, when the clock strikes 12, that we're all going to be swept away. So
okay, can we get that in writing to ensure that they will never make another video on these sorts of subjects?
I don't know. I think that we should ask. So, because people ought not to be doing this sort of thing if they're misleading people. Now, I know that we're humans and we all make mistakes, and we hopefully repent for our mistakes. But if you're going to put out something where you're saying this thing is going to happen, and you're not researching and you're not taking enough time to really look into it, instead you're trying to make some conspiracy thing out of it, and you're going to tell people the rapture is happening on a certain date and whatnot, I don't think you have any business leading any sort of a flock, because you're going to lead people straight to disappointment. You might even turn people away from God and just cause people to really walk in darkness. So I think this is very, very important. And I think it's very important as a Christian putting out information that you put out the truth and make sure it is the truth. And if you don't know, don't put it out, or put it out and say, hey, here's what so-and-so is saying. Here's the facts. I don't know what'll happen. At least do that, but don't put things out telling people this is what's going to happen. And so I just think that's very important. But, I do hear a lot of people talking about Planet X, Niburu, just over the past few years. And like you said, you hear about it for a while, then suddenly you don't hear about it. Then it comes back. And I don't know is there really some planet out there somewhere, maybe not Niburu, that there's all this big news that somebody discovered some planet that was like Earth. And I'm assuming that is Niburu once again. It's
the early Earth-like planets they're claiming would be orbiting other stars. I don't believe they found any Earth-like planets, by the way, but the claims of Earth-like planets are definitely orbiting other stars. They would never orbit the sun, come here. And again, I mentioned the possibility of suggested a few months ago that there could be a large body out beyond the orbit of Neptune. But it's not likely to come any closer than Neptune to us, if that close even. And this thing is very far out, if it's out there at all, because people have looked for it. It should show up in the infrared. It hasn't been found. Things like this, large objects, are not easy to hide. We have a thing called linear that's looking for near Earth asteroids. These are things that could potentially hit the Earth and really leave a huge impact on the Earth. And it's discovered thousands of asteroids and comets. There's another one, I can't remember the name of it now, that's done a similar thing. We've now discovered nearly 1 million asteroids orbiting the sun. Most of them are very tiny. Yet somehow a planet that's maybe half the size of Jupiter has escaped our detection, even though it's skirting about through the inner solar system. Well, an object that big would be one of the brightest objects in the sky at night. And again, I'm a student of the sky. I have never seen anything like that. No other astronomer that I'm aware of has seen anything like that. All these conspiracy claims notwithstanding, folks, it's not there. I would have seen it. Other people would have seen it. And I'm going to share it with the world if I found something like that. But I haven't.
Well, I think that a lot of people should take up astronomy and learn it a little bit and get a very high powered telescope and go look for themselves and find it. If it's out there, maybe they would see it on a high powered telescope if it exists. And that's what they should do. Otherwise, we're taking people's words for it. Just like you mentioned earlier, we shouldn't just take everybody's word that, oh, this exists. Oh, there's this out in the solar system and it's Planet X. We're just taking people's words for it. So if people really want to find the truth and they think that they're being lied to, then I would just suggest, like I said, they get a high powered telescope and go out there and look around,
But a lot of these, the size of object we're talking about wouldn't require a telescope at all. It would be visible to the naked eye as a bright star-like object. Venus is in the morning sky right now. It's very bright. Jupiter is not visible right now because it's behind the sun, but it'll pop out in a few months in the morning sky. It will be the second brightest object in the sky after the sun and the moon, of course. If there were a large planet roaming about in the inner solar system, it would be very easy to spot with the naked eye. And it seemed like it only shows up for a minute or two to people with their cell phones, and then it's gone after that. And that doesn't make any sense. If you know anything about orbital dynamics, it makes no sense whatsoever.
You could see it with the naked eye. I didn't realize that, again, because I'm not an astronomer like you, so I wouldn't know that. But I guarantee some people would go out there and see one of these planets with their naked eye, and then they would take photos of it, and then they would post it on the internet, and it would go all over Facebook, and they would say, I saw Planet X in the sky last night, when it was actually Saturn or Jupiter. And
we'll be very careful. They've actually put a lot of photos on the internet, but again, they're lens flares, and they're defects of various types, and some things are so fuzzy I can't make a head or tail of them. It's These are not these are not planets in the sky. People who are taking these photographs have no idea about astronomy. I mean, if I took them outside and said, "Okay, can you point out any planets to me?" they wouldn't have a clue where to even start. And yet somehow they're experts on something that's unusually out there. And that's not that's not the way you make a good argument for this.
Well, you're going to be putting out an article here in the next few weeks on this very subject. And, unfortunately, I can't post it below the video now because this video will be uploaded before your article is out. But I encourage everyone to go check out Danny over Answers in Genesis, and that is answersingenesis.com. And go ahead.
I was going to say, I do have one article out there in Niburu. It went up a few months ago. The one you're referring to, I've drafted, and it will be going up in a few weeks. It's kind of a follow-up article to it because I think there's more to be said there. So more needed to be talked about.
Well, I will post the link to your article that's already out below this video so people can at least see that and they can research it for themselves. Because I really, people get mad at me, but they should be happy that I am, really trying to research the truth and present the truth and the factual information for them. But people have actually made videos now since our September 23rd video interviews that we did. People are making videos calling me a false prophet and everything else. And I don't know where I prophesied anything. I'm not the one prophesying anything at all. I'm sharing facts with people.
Isn't that weird? It's got this completely backwards.
Yeah, I'm not prophesying anything. I'm showing people the facts about the astronomy and the facts that you are well aware of that you're presenting to the people. I'm not the one prophesying anything. I'm not a prophetess or a prophet. And I really get leery of people who use those terms. You see all over the internet now, prophet so-and-so or prophetess so-and-so or evangelist so-and-so, self-proclaimed prophets. So, I'm not one of those. I want to share the truth with people because I don't want people to be disappointed. And I believe a lot of negativity can come from these false things that are being put out when they don't happen. So that's very important to me. And those of you listening should be very happy that I am researching and finding the truth. So anyhow, do you have any final thoughts or words to share with the listeners before we end the show here?
Just to be, people ought to be Bereans, they ought to be critically thinking, and they ought to compare everything we say with Scripture and ultimately check the facts out for themselves.
Agreed, 100%. That's what people need to do. The Bible tells us to do it. And for those of you out there, Danny and I do believe in Bible prophecy and believe in the Bible 100%. We are just trying to share the facts so that none of you are led astray, because there is a lot of deception being shared, particularly on YouTube. And quite honestly, I'm tired of it and I don't want any part of that. I just want to be part of sharing the truth. So Danny, I appreciate you taking the time out to inform my listeners and anyone else that happens to stumble across this interview. I know that you are very busy and your time is precious, like the rest of us. So I really appreciate you doing that.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, thank you, and God bless you. And to those of you listening, be sure and check out Answers in Genesis at answersingenesis.com. And the link to Danny's article will be posted below this video. And subscribe for updates at their website. So hopefully when his new article, his update, does come out in a few weeks, hopefully you will be notified about that and you can go check it out. Thanks again, Danny, and God bless you.